hopefully we will refine based on this new plan, right now leaves some ambiguity in the number of units that should go on for a planned development site for residential. Okay, so we're trying to get a workable document for you folks. And one of the other big changes in the document is that for these different, the categories you just saw, they're not just only one use allowed on a particular site. There's a pick list on there. So based on changing conditions in society in general and then specific in Walker, there are opportunities for you to do more than just the same kind of house in a development. It doesn't mean you have to, but it means that if someone comes in and wants to do different pods of development, particularly on a very large site, maybe that makes sense. So the plan enables that now. All of this is subject to public review. It's not prescriptive. So we're not trying to jump the public hearing process or jump the public process. And again, remember, this is a guide. Okay? It's in the middle of that screen there. That's right. It's the wonders of 2020. The next layer that we updated in the plan that you asked us to do is how do we determine density on properties? So we have two types of density. We have gross density and then we have practical density. On the right is the way that we would typically do something where, I'll give you an example, Winchester Woods, the subdivision that's gone in on Kinney. That was not a clustered development. It's a good development, but it's not a clustered development. So it pretty much cleared the site and then the homes went in. And that's fine. But if a developer wants to do something like that, they will use practical density to get a maximum yield on that site. And you see the equation on the right-hand side. It's a lower yield of units in exchange for the ability to do a traditional development. On the left-hand side of that screen is something we're going to look at, a couple of properties where this may work, is if you have a piece of property that has some existing natural features, some topography, some water, some mature woods, this is the opportunity for a developer to come in and do some clustering and get a little bit of an incentive in density. And we'll look at English Hills Golf Course as one of the sites where this may work, where you can preserve a lot of the site and still do a density that's low and consistent with the plan, but nook in some of the development so you're not just flattening the site. So that's really a goal, I think, that's in this plan, is to offer the traditional way of doing development, but then also, hey, look at it. On some of these sites, how about we don't just flatten everything out and clear it? Let's try and work with the land a little bit. Okay? So we explain the math in that, and the density application will be a guide for future zoning reviews. Now, where will those apply? We took a look at what we call significant undeveloped lots in the city. We identified 41 of those. They're spread from the northerly edge at 4 Mile and Alpine all the way to the southwesterly edge at the Grand River and Wilson Avenue. These are large lots that haven't been developed over the years, probably because they haven't been for sale. Excuse me, I'm choking on my mask. All right. So they're sitting out there. We know that these are the remaining large lots. So we wanted to call those out in the plan and have some kind of a guide. So if a plan comes in, you can say, okay, we've got an updated plan for this project. Okay? And this was, really the content for the August 26th agenda. In there, for each one of those lots, is this spreadsheet that explains gross density and practical density for each one of these lots. So if a developer comes in, we can say English Hills, here are the two density limits on that site. Because typically what we struggle with in the planning and zoning process is arguing about density, number of units, that relates to the sale cost of the property. So we're trying to give some kind of a reasonable expectation on these properties. both for the officials and for property owners and for citizens. Okay? It's way too small to read, so we're going to skip right over. And these are the properties that you folks told us to tune up the plan on. So the English Hills area is not just the English Hills Golf Course. It includes the Engman property to the west, and then there is a church-owned property on the south side of 96 that butts up against 3 Mile. I believe that's Orchard Hill. So they have another big piece of property there. So what are we going to do with all those? So look at the acreage. And then here's the kicker on the English Hills is it's already zoned RPUD2. So years ago, in the early 2000s, that property was rezoned to what is a high-density residential district. So the zoning is in place, which means that there are legal obligations, etc. But what we wanted to do was take a closer look at that property, in particular, and the other two that we talked about that are outlined in blue, and to put some reasonable expectations. So here's what you folks told us to do. They will all be master plan 2 to 4 units per acre. Okay? Whether that's gross or whether that's practical will depend on the design. And if you look at particularly the properties north of the expressway, on any kind of aerial photo, you will see that there's quite a bit of natural feature on those properties. There's also a significant up and down with the grades at the bottom of the fruit ridge. So we changed all of the planning to 2 to 4 units per acre. We put in the open space provision, which is the hash line that wraps around the existing development, particularly in the condos and the plat. And then Northridge Drive continued as a public street from Bristol up to the Signal 4 Mile course. So, those changes have been made. And unless I hear that we screwed something up on that, I'm going to go to the next one. Okay? All right. Fenske, which is a site that we talk about an awful lot. This is the site at the far southwest corner of the city. It includes the old Fenske landfill and then property owned by the Wellers and then the Shoemaker sand pit. We didn't make any changes to that outside of 2008. What we did take off was the road network, and we left the trail connections in. Future greenway along the river, hopefully. That one hasn't been touched. The roads are off. I just wanted to get that in front of you folks, or in case if any of the property owners were here. So that has not changed since 2008. Okay. Richmond Farms is a property to the east that is a large amount of property, 240 acres. It butts up against Richmond on the south, 3 Mile on the north. It's a large piece of property. A lot of it has been farmed, but a lot of it is wetlands. So this is one of those sites where you folks told us to make sure there's a road connection in as Mullins extended. You folks have already adopted what's called a precise plat for a portion of that street. And hopefully some point in the future there will be a beaten connection from Richmond north to 3 Mile. And then the development density would be 2 to 4 units per acre. As you see in the yellow there in the plan, and then the Planning Commission, City Commission told us make sure there's a component for 4 to 8 units per acre as you get north, because that may be the transition point to future industrial. And there's also quite a bit of wetland up in that part of this property, so we put in the open space preservation. There's also some parks noted on there, and then also the bike path connection. So is that consistent? We were told to adjust that line a little bit. I'm seeing some head shaking. Okay. We'll move on to the next one, which is West Standale. They just did the Blaine's Farm and Fleet opening tonight. So this part of town, if you say, where's the most active part in Walker, this is probably it. Intersection of Lake Michigan Drive and Wilson. But what's going to happen west of Meyer and west of Blaine's? So we took a look at that. And we identified the properties that are in there. They're really strange parcels. They wouldn't be permitted anymore because they're so long and so narrow. But there's a decent amount of acreage in there. The zoning is kind of a hodgepodge. And I think some of that C4 stretching in there, which is the darker red, may go back to the old drive-in, because I think that may have been part of that use. But then the majority of the property is zoned agricultural, and it's fine. But it's certainly in a prime location. So that's the existing zoning, so most of it will have to be rezoned, which means then you apply your master plan. And your master plan, it we changed, tuned up a little bit, is that you would have residential growth, 4 to 8 units per acre. That's the orangish color behind Meyer, to the west. And then neighborhood corridor, which is kind of a urban mixed-use development area, would be to the north, and we dropped that line down. I think that was direction given by the Planning Commission. So hopefully that's what you were looking for. But we do want to keep this in the plan. There's a couple of spots in the city, and this is one of them, that you may have the opportunity between now and 2040 to do something a little bit different, as opposed to just putting big boxes in. Maybe you can do more of a neighborhood design. So we're going to leave this stylistic plan in the master plan. And we have met with the developers over the years, and their idea is pretty consistent with this idea. Who knows how it's going to shake out, but this is more of a connected streets, no big box, mixed use, something that complements the Laker line. So we'll see, but we're going to leave that in the plan. Lincoln Lawns. This site has been hot and cold for the past 6+ months. Large property, used to be local ownership, AMF bought the entire thing. Bowling alley property, and then the golf course. That was probably 10 or 12 years ago. And now we're starting to see some interest in potentially converting that site. If you look at the site, it doesn't have as much grade or natural features as English Hills Golf Course, but it does have some. So, property is significant, 105 acres right on Lake Michigan Drive, development all around it. Zoned agricultural, which is important, because right now, only 1 unit per acre is allowed. So anything that happens on here will have to do a rezoning, which triggers the public process. Okay? And that's where you apply your master plan, which at this point, based on the direction we've received, the majority of the site would be 2 to 4 units per acre. There is a large wetland up against M45. You see that protected in the hash green. Some of the neighborhood corridor, neighborhood node mixed use along M45. And then residential growth, 4 to 8 units per acre that butts up against the existing apartment complex, which is actually much higher density. And then some of the road network ghosted in there as well. Now, I don't know if all that's going to happen on that site, but again, it will have to be rezoned, and that's where you will be able to use this as a guide to determine what's appropriate and what's not. Okay. This one's a little bit unusual, it doesn't even have a name. 2 lots to the west of the Environmental Academy, Leonard, west of M11, actually, Wilson Avenue. So a couple of big properties sitting in there, large lake on one of them, zoning's agricultural. The school is shown in blue, and the properties themselves are in your plan right now just to be 2 to 4 units per acre. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but that's the guide. I think it's probably going to be pretty much stay the way it is for the foreseeable future. And then we added the neighborhood node and neighborhood commercial strip on the south side of Leonard. That was something that the City Commission and Planning Commission directed us to do. So potentially there can be some kind of a local service component for all of the fairly high density residential that surrounds this site. So that change was made. And then if you look at, there's a couple of notes on there to myself, just so I don't forget, that we do have to fine tune the Lewis Farms site to trim down the amount of commercial on there. It's just the corner. So the bright red box you see outlined in black, that's all the commercial that's going to be on that site. That's consistent with the plans that you folks have approved. And that is the rundown of all the edits we've made. I am more than willing to take questions, discussion, etc. We do have a public hearing scheduled. It's been noticed appropriately. And I'm gonna get out of the way and let you folks do your thing.
Okay, Frank, before you step down, from the Planning Commission, any questions about the overview Frank provided? He did bring us up to date on the discussions that took place in a joint meeting back on August 26th. Again, I observed along with Frank that generally it appeared that the recommendations are portrayed to be consistent with that conversation that day. Do you have any disagreements with that, or does everything at this point look consistent with it? I guess we're all set with that then. At this point, this is a public hearing, so we'll be asking for a motion to open the public hearing, and at that point, you'll be given an opportunity to provide questions you have about the plan overall, any particular locations. So this is an opportunity to pose that. We ask that you identify yourself, your name and your address. And do we have a motion to open the public hearing? Motion by Steve, supported by Jason to open the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. 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 Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Again, the public hearing is opened. If you anyone wanting to offer comment or question, step forward to the podium and, like I say, give your name and address, and we'll listen to what you have to say.
Hi, Dennis Higgins, 1225 Port Fleet.
Sir, I'm sorry, could you push the button for the microphone, please? There you go.
All right. Dennis Higgins, 1225 Port Fleet. Hi, everyone. I enjoyed that description the engineer gave. It made the master plan a lot more palatable. So I'm wondering, is 4 Mile, where we're talking about the Amazon place across from the high school, is that in fact a no truck route? And are we actually going to dump all the trucks right out in front of the high school? And as I look, I've been a resident here a little over 5 years. Are we looking at any kind of a ceiling? Because when I look around at things are developing, and I'm not against any one company, I may stop by Chick-fil-A sometime, but I think we'll be always too busy. And I understand progress, but for the experience of the people in the city, I posted, I hate to say this, but on Facebook, about should we pump the brakes on progress, and about 87% seem to be in favor of that. So do we have any kind of a ceiling on what we're going to do with traffic? And are we, always keeping that at the forefront? Because there's, on I think 3 Mile, we have the FedEx, we have the state police. On Kinney, we have the Meadowbrook. There's a lot of things that probably a lot of you in here know more than I do, that we have not even seen the traffic yet. Plus, I think with the COVID thing, we are not getting the full impact of that now, and it may be delayed of the traffic we're actually going to experience. I saw in the Chick-fil-A notes that there would be a 15 to 17 second delay at an intersection. I think at the intersection of Wilson and M45. So I'm just thinking that all that might add up. And I think a lot of us live in Walker because we don't want to live in Grand Rapids. That's all, thanks.
Are there any other comment, questions people have? If if I may, with respect to some of the questions you raised, this plan does look at future land use, but there are other components dealing with transportation, the road network and the like. And contained within this are recommendations for expansion of the road network as the area develops, additional ways for people to get around the community and more efficiently and effectively is brought out in that. And through our review process, there are traffic studies required of large developments to take into account what that impact may be. And that'll be evidenced as we get to the next item on the agenda dealing with the Amazon request. So you may find a little more perspective at that point in time. Any other takers as far as offering public comment?
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Pat, supported by Steve to close the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Well, we've been spending a lot of time on this, as Frank mentioned, since 2018. This is perhaps the culmination of that in terms of developing the plan. The next 20 years is actually working towards the implementation of it. There's a lot of good work that's been done in terms of, first off, public involvement. We've had an opportunity to take part as planning commissioners with these neighborhood meetings, and it's always heartwarming to see the number of people in this community that turn out to these meetings and provide, I think, very meaningful input. It's also heartwarming to see that the involvement on this project in terms of staff is not just the planning department, community development, the engineering office, police department, fire department. All the city departments have provided some perspective here that I think will be reflected throughout the plan. And in terms of the consultant group, I think the consultant group did a very good job of guiding us through this process, working with staff to come up with the plan that you have at hand. And I think it's a very forward-looking document and well-developed and with a lot of good direction on how to move forward that we can draw upon going forward. Any other comments on the process or on the plan that's before us as we ready for making a recommendation to the City Commission?
I thought, can we talk to?
Yes, please.
I thought you made an excellent presentation. It was non-argumentative. Obviously, thought it out very well. And a lot of people feel that way. You know, we're in here, we got all this land, we want to mess it up. I have 4 kids and 10 grandchildren. I'm getting old, and I thought I was going to die from the COVID. I didn't, obviously. But we decided where we I got a fair amount of land compared to Blue Island, but some. We can sit there, we can look out 6, 8, 10 acres. I said, what do you guys want to do with this? And I thought we could divide it up, and, you know, you can make a little money on this. We don't want anything that's done with it either. We want to keep it just like it is. Well, it's like, it's still the same way you do. But we want progress. We want to live in a community. People want, we got jobs, we got a medical society. It's a booming place. We've all got, you know, so we want that. We want growth. The opposite is, you know, I could have gone to Flint. You know, we could have ended up in Flint. We would have been, you know, been different. I'm sorry, I feel for you. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Thank you. I see negative comments sometimes, and, you know, I knew all this, but I think instead of negative comments, people should just get involved in their city government.
Well, do I hear a motion as far as forwarding this along to the City Commission?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Tyler,
Support.
support by Jason, to recommend to the City Commission the proposed drafted document
Okay, thank you again. You get to listen to me one more time here, and then Tricia's got the rest of the agenda. Interesting comment, and just for perspective, if you go back to the 1959 plan, and particularly the 1969 plan, Walker was benchmarking to Flint and Warren. It's right there. Build out for the city of Walker was proposed to be 80,000 to 90,000 people. That shows you how things change. Right now, your build out in your 2020 plan is maybe 40,000 people, depending on if you can get utilities in South Walker. So if anything, the projected growth in Walker has continuously been down-tuned since the late 60s. I would call that more of the old Michigan economic development model, based on the communities they were benchmarking to. And what's happened is folks like this in this room over the past 50 years have redefined the city. And we've redefined it through the master plan, zoning ordinance, and what you spend your money on. Okay? And I agree with your comments. Thank you for that. Okay, main event of the night is the Amazon site. This is an immediate application of your master plan. And if this process looks familiar, it's because it's essentially the same process that Walkerview did. And Walkerview is the site between Walker Avenue and Bristol, where FedEx, State Police, Falk, what's the name of the Bell company? Flexco, and other local industrial businesses, plus the hotel. Same kind of development. You're starting with farmland. How do you manage the growth? Okay? How do we not screw things up, essentially? And how do you plan so that what's going in there will still be sustainable 20, 30 years from now? So the comments I put in this slide deck here go through those questions, and it's up to the Planning Commission to determine whether those questions have been answered. And we're going to rely on the development group to fill in the blanks for the Planning Commission. So my job is to kind of set things up, hand it off to the city engineer, and then it becomes deliberation via public hearing. So this project is called Northridge East. It's an industrial planned unit development. The developer is Visser Group along with Amazon. And the project is a delivery station on Lot 8. This is step 3 on this site. There's already been rezoning, preliminary plan, and now we are at what's called final area site plan, which is each specific lot coming in because there are multiple lots on this site. So recently, over this past summer, additional properties were acquired by the development team. They can fill in the blanks on that. Homes were removed or moved, and some residential sites were rezoned to industrial, consistent with the master plan. So this is how the master plan gets implemented. This is the PASP, the preliminary site plan for the whole development. And the site we're looking at tonight is in the red box. So obviously, when you add up all that projected square feet, that's pretty significant. It's as significant as Walkerview is, the other project with FedEx, et cetera. So when you do something like this, you've got to lay out road, water, sewer, drain, and you've got to do it carefully. So in 2008, believe it or not, the City Planning Commission, the City Commission adopted what's called a precise plat to put Northridge Drive in from Fruit Ridge all the way through to 4 Mile and Cordis. And at that time, it seemed like it was a little bit radical of an idea, and it would maybe premature, but that went into the city zoning ordinance. When Walkerview came in, that road went in along with other improvements on 4 Mile Road, which is a truck route, which is owned by Kent County Road Commission. So that's where you saw us able to make some changes at 4 Mile in Bristol, 4 Mile in Cordis, and 4 Mile in Hendershot. And if you go back even further than 2008 to the late 90s, if you've been around that long, you remember before the high school went in, that was an orchard. And when the high school went in, that totally changed traffic patterns It changed drainage patterns. I was working for the township at that time, going from farm to a lot of pavement and rooftop, really changed that area. The other change that's happened since that time is Roth Trucking, which was a fixture at 4 Mile and Hendershot. That was a shipping receiving place, semi-trucks. They have since closed down and moved to 54th Street. So this is an area that, on its surface, without context, this may seem like a pretty radical change, but this is an area that has been changing for the past 20 plus years. That said, we have to be careful with development, and we have to be careful with land use change. So, the red box is what we're going to look at tonight. If you've been out there, Northridge Drive is almost finished. The city half is done. The other half being done by Visser Brothers is coming online. New water tank is put in. Traffic signals, etc. We'll get into that in a second. So here's where we're at from traffic planning. We know that the intersection of 4 Mile and Walker doesn't work, and it's not going to work in the future. And it doesn't work for a variety of reasons. That's why we have the circle around that. It doesn't take a study to go out there and know that it's in the floodplain. The buildings are right up there. It used to be called Wilder Center. It's not something that can be improved without a heck of a lot of money. So what we did back in 2008 was said the best we can do is plan around it. So we put in the Northridge connector. When FedEx came in, we said you need to get a bypass to that intersection, which has become Shippers Drive, which is a public street. And then on the westerly edge, that dashed red line was Northridge Drive to connect where it was already built, next to, I believe, this Ridgeview Stamping, where the old Grand Rapids Press building used to be. That's just been a long dead end for decades. Visser Brothers came in and put the first extension in east of Northridge. We worked with Irwin Seating on a grant to get the intersection of Northridge and Fruit Ridge ready for a signal. And then Visser Brothers has since come in and with this IPUD plan. So on the IPUD plan is a connector to 4 Mile and Hendershot. The goal here is to build a network. Your semis will naturally gravitate south to the expressway, and then your workers and your shipper vans, in this case, can go in 3 different directions. They can go to traffic signals at each point. So that's the plan. So fill in the blanks, and this is the plan that you have in front of you tonight, which is for the Amazon site. This is a different site, and we're going to let the developer fill in the blanks, but the site in Gaines Township is somewhere around 1 million square feet. It's a big building. It's more of a core warehouse from what I understand. This is only 113,000 square feet. So it's about 1/10 of the size as Gaines Township. And that's something to keep in mind. Now, there's still over 1,000 parking spaces on there. That's for the vans, the employees, the van drivers, and then at the southerly end of the building is where the shipping and semis come in. So, and then the rest of the site plan proposes to put Northridge connecting to Northridge connecting to 4 Mile and Hendershot all the way around. You can see the orange road network built in, which is consistent with our master plan. And then we also want to make it look nice, so there's quite a landscaping plan on that in this package, because this would be a gateway. School to the north, industrial park to the south, but well-designed, highly functional. So I have some conditions. I'm more than willing to go through those with you. I just wanted to get them on this slide. But before we get to that point, I'm going to hand it back to you folks. You've heard enough from me. And let's get some engineering comments and public hearing form. That's enough for now.
Okay, any questions or comments for Frank? I'll switch over to city engineer Scott Connors.
Okay, so Frank did a good job of giving kind of the planning overview, from a little higher up. I'm going to give you a little bit more on the detail. And this is a big set of plans, and it's a big project, so there's a lot of detail. So you might, I already heard a couple comments, boy, your report's quite long. We really don't like that. I think when you get a bigger plan like this, it just has to be longer. There's just a lot of detail. So the first comment in there comes with a picture. There was a lot of cutting and filling going on this site as part of the overall PASP and the development of the road. And, you know, we don't like to see that, but sometimes it's necessary because we don't want to have the road built and then have heavy equipment driving back and forth across the road to carry material from one side to the other. So some amount of balancing was allowed out there. This location in the picture, we were concerned it might have been cut too much because originally when the grading was going on there wasn't any thought of a road for Hendershot. And if we're going to build a public road over an area, we want to make sure it has the right compaction, has the right soils. So in that area, we want to make sure there's a geotechnical report providing density, making sure that that is suitable for public road and public utilities that go along with that. I think it's important for the Planning Commission to inquire about the rideshare program, and I think at staff level, it's been hard for us to get our arms around the diversity of parking on this site. When you see 800 van parking spots, 300 passenger car parking spots, 150 employees just in the building itself, and I think it's important for you guys to get your arms around how does that all fit together and how does it work with rideshare, with swapping out parking spots, all those kinds of things, because as all the departments around site plan review sit around, and that's not just engineering and planning, that's police, fire, DPW, you know, we wanted to make sure that we were comfortable, but I think ultimately it's up to you folks to make sure you're comfortable. So I think that's an important thing to ask about. The Hendershot Road alignment, a couple things to point out there. We want to make sure that that road is built independently, but also concurrently during the construction site work if this was to move forward. We want to make sure there's no construction traffic entering the Amazon site while that's being constructed. And we talk a lot about that with plats. That's usually where this comes up. We want to make sure that nobody's building any houses while the road's under construction, because then you get the concrete truck, you get, you know, the plumbing guys and the waterproofers and all these people driving over this road that's maybe half constructed, maybe even worse, it's 2/3 or 3/4 constructed, dragging clay into the gravel, driving over under drains and all those kinds of things. So it's important to note here, we want to make this a condition that access for that private site does not come via a half-built Hendershot. It's got to be built and completed, inspected, and taken care of, and I think they can do that quite easily. But it's an important part of this. And that also falls into the discussion about the truck dock and the driveway there. We want to make sure that's all built from the interior too, even though it's immediately adjacent to Hendershot. The plans that you're looking at, there'll probably be a little bit of a different configuration in terms of the water main and how the fire protection would lay out. As you know, while you're reviewing plans here, there's a lot of other detail that's being reviewed in terms of traffic, in terms of sanitary sewers, water main, and even the road improvement plans themselves. That all happens at staff level, kind of concurrently, but usually after the fact. And I think there's going to be some changes there, so we want you to be a little bit flexible with that. We'll make sure the changes don't impact the fire coverage for the building, but it may impact how that comes together. And that's kind of still in the works at this point. We want to make sure that this entire area is covered with sidewalk. Sidewalk grades are needed. That's getting to be a pretty regular comment from us. We want to make sure that every 50 feet it's detailed so we can reproduce that in the field. There's also a missing piece of sidewalk on North Ridge in front of the detention pond. So we've got to make sure that that's put in there too. There won't be anybody to put that in later, so it needs to go in now as part of this construction. The plans also call for quite a bit of improvement at 4 Mile and Hendershot. I won't go through all the details on that, but there's a long list of things that are being done there to comply with the rules of the Kent County Road Commission. Our rules and their rules are a little bit different in terms of road widths and taper lengths and things like that. But I can assure you that they've done everything they need to do to get the Road Commission comfortable with the layout, and they'll taper and blend that into our standards as they go further south down that road. Those details will be worked out again after the fact as we review street improvement plans at the local level. The next item talks about the traffic study. Maybe I'll give a little bit more information than what's written here, because I think the report itself says there's going to be minimal impact, and I think it's important to share some details of that with you. The way that the data has been provided to the traffic engineer, it deals with kind of an off-peak traffic volume from the site. So as you blend the traffic from this proposed site together with the existing traffic, it's done in a way that the peaks don't overlap. So in theory, the morning rush doesn't get any worse, the evening rush doesn't get any worse, but there's a second and a third rush maybe, or a third and a fourth rush at different times throughout the day. And I think the big one is the 10 to 11 in the morning. I forget, they have a term for that in the study. I just read that and I can't remember the name of it, but it's an off-peak rush where they would have quite a bit going on in terms of the vans. And I think that's really what the public has been concerned about is the van parking. So it's important for you to consider that. I think the importance of that is that if Amazon loves this site, really starts to utilize it, maybe even overutilize it, there has been talk that they could go to as many as 3 shifts on this site, and it's important for you folks to understand that those times may not be locked in terms of your planning commission approval. So go into that with your eyes wide open that, a 10 to 11 in the morning shift could be moved around, and maybe it's something worth talking about and even conditioning to make sure that we don't have a rush that's also overlapping the Kennel Hills rush in the morning. I think that would be a really bad thing at Fruit Ridge and Northridge, for example. As you move further through that item on the study, on the report here, it does talk about some conditions, or a condition from the Visser Development Northridge East PASP, which calls for them participating for part of the traffic signal at Fruit Ridge and Northridge. And while the traffic study doesn't necessarily say that it's warranted, they agree in the conclusions in the traffic study that they think the conditions are coming to warrant that. And so from a city perspective, we think it's super important to have that in place. We talk about level of service for intersection improvements. One of the key movements, which is westbound and then turning left onto Fruit Ridge or south towards the highway, would be at level of service F in the evening. And it's pretty intuitive. F is bad. F is failing. So the traffic signal would take care of that, as well as a few other things there that I think are beneficial. So we believe that at staff level that, well, first of all, the $112,000 has been deposited. So we have that now. That's a great thing. We don't have to argue about it later. The next step for us is to move forward with designing that and moving that project forward. So that's in place. There's a need for 10-foot private utility easements. You see those on every project. So I think they should be shown on the Northridge East project for Northridge itself. Hendershot will also need those. I point that out because a lot of times if you come after the fact and bring that to a developer, they throw their hands up and say, why didn't you tell us that before? It's fairly consistent. It's in our standard details. It's written everywhere. The uniqueness here is that if this property transfers ownership after this evening, which is very possible, I think they want to move the property from one owner to the other, we may miss out on the 10-foot utility easement on Northridge before that project is even completed. So if that happens, I think my report states that would come from the Amazon site owners on Northridge as well as Hendershot. So I think it's important to make sure that's included as a condition. Because the alignment at Hendershot has changed from what was previously called East Valley Court, there is a sanitary sewer easement. It's actually a public utility easement that kind of just goes into the center of the parking lot here on this site. If you look close at the plans, you can see that, and you kind of probably wonder, what is it? It's a recorded easement that's there, and it's going to be a little bit troublesome, I think, for the site owner. We're not requiring that it be removed, but certainly recommending, because it's going to impede their ability to do certain kinds of things, plant trees, put in street lights, parking lot lights, those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that the owner, as this is transitioned from the developer to owner, that they understand that, and they may want to consider working on that. The truck dock driveway has driveway radii that are bigger than we would normally allow, so they're going to have to do some further justification. If the plan moves forward tonight, we don't want that to just be automatically included. We want to see that further justification in terms of truck turning templates and things like that, consistent with our highway rules and regulations. You'll notice that there's a detention pond here, and if you paid attention, you've also noticed that there's a large detention pond for this industrial park, And we don't typically have to put more detention in. It's all part of the industrial park. In this case, there's so much pervious intensity out here. There's so much pavement and rooftop compared to what was originally designed, that in order to make that all fit and not have a detrimental impact on the development, they had to add more stormwater control. So they'll have a small stormwater pond. It's actually quite good that they'll have that there, because it'll take care of all of the first flush water from the parking area, truck dock area. Those kinds of places often have a lot of grits and grimes and things that wash off. So again, as we typically say, we want to make sure that there's a note on the plan about maintenance to make sure that that's taken care of. As we move forward, the state's going to be requiring us to do checkups on all these sites, and so that's got to be on the plan, so that we don't have to start from scratch every time telling people that they have to take care of their parking lots. That leads into the idea about the catch basins. We didn't see anything in there on catch basin details, but they've got to have a standard 4-foot diameter basins with 2-foot sumps to hold a lot of the dirt and the grime and stuff that's developed in a big parking lot like this. So that should be added to the plan. The next note deals with the 4 Mile Road water tank. As you all know, we put a new water tank in there a few years ago, and that water tank allowed for fire protection where we didn't previously have it for most of the industrial property north of the highway. And this lot is right in the middle of that area where development before would not have been possible but for the water tank. So we have a cost that we associate with all of these sites as they develop to pay the system back. So the money that they have to pay is over a 3-year period. That has been deposited for September 30th of 2020. The developer will have to make 2 more payments in 2021 and 2022, but you can check the box there, that is in place. Last 2 notes here. The sheet L1.03 talks about sprinkling in the right-of-way, and I see Frank had a note about that too, asking that they get an agreement with the city for that. We typically would allow that to be done, but not permit it, because there's issues with misdig. Who's going to come out and locate that when somebody's putting in a fiber optic or fixing a sanitary sewer or something like that? It's pretty difficult to handle that with the staking and with the insurance and all those kinds of things. So we would typically say that's at their risk. They can put it out there, but if somebody's coming through with a construction project, they're going to tear it up, and they're not going to put it back in place for them. It's kind of at their risk. And then the last thing is that we do have a draft set of the road plans for Hendershot. We just haven't reviewed them yet. If this moves past tonight successfully, or successfully with conditions, then we would start to get into those details and work through that. If you had questions, we could certainly provide you more updates later, but it'll be pretty standard. That road's going to be 36 feet wide, the same dimensions as Northridge itself. I think the one issue that you see there is that there's a 90-degree bend that's been softened up as much as possible to allow for a 25-mile-an-hour design speed. Details yet to be determined, but that's what we're striving for there, to make sure that it's at least 25 miles an hour. So, long report, sorry for that, but this might be your last chance to get those details worked out.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Scott's report? You'll notice,
I got questions.
go ahead, Pat.
Just a couple questions. Looking at the plan, and I'm sure the truck templates already showed it, but there's, when you come in off Hendershot, there's that one where they show a semi turning in the employee entrance there. It just didn't look like a semi can make that turn, but I'm assuming the truck template shows that it can make it. It just doesn't look like a very good turn in there. I think like they can run across the yard before
Right.
they...
And the catch there is it looks like a truck, but it's actually the fire truck, which has a very different configuration than a semi that would come in there with product. So it's shaped a little bit more like a bus, and it's
So it will make
obviously
that-
less frequent. You know, that's going to be a very infrequent movement, hopefully.
Right.
Hopefully never, but you never know. And
I just didn't know semis were coming off 4 Mile, coming down the side of the building there and then backing into the back
Right.
end of the building.
They will not be, well, who knows what happens in the future if they try
Right.
to do that, but as we talked about this at site plan review, they said that those are not truck movements, that's purely for fire protection.
Gotcha. The other question I had is I saw the smoking canopy in the front, which faces 4 Mile, which faces the high school. Will that be seen from 4 Mile, or will that be kind of hidden by landscaping, do we know? think
It's
will
a
be.
better question for the developer.
Okay, all right.
Any other comments? Just take note, and I think Frank called it out as well, within Scott's review, he has a number of recommendations that he's explained as you go through that, and at some points we'll ask the developer just to acknowledge their understanding of those requirements and if they have any issue with those. All right. At this point, we'll ask the developer to come forward. Yeah. Jason, don't let me forget we have received a note. At this point, we'll have the developer come forward and give their presentation for the project.
Good evening. My name's Kyle Schott. I represent Ryan Companies, and we represent the tenant that is going to be on this project. I'm going to kind of MC any developer questions tonight. With me is Greg Bull with Visser, as well as Josh Mannion from Progressive AE, architect engineer. And I'm hoping on the line is Kyle DeGilio with Amazon. Can you confirm, Kyle?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Great.
Okay, and I believe Brian Krajniak with Amazon is also on the line. Now, Kyle represents economic development with Amazon, and Brian represents construction management. So, as discussed, we are presenting on a fulfillment center, or delivery station, more accurately, on 38 acres, just off of 4 Mile. Hearing a lot of comments, questions on traffic, which we're prepared to discuss any specific items there. Landscape buffer with 4 Mile Road. Landscape plan should show somewhat of a significant landscape buffer. If a specific area is of concern, we can look at that more specifically and add landscaping as necessary. But beyond what we've shown on the plan, again, I'd like to stick to more specific questions and address those as they come up. So I guess I open it up to the commission to any questions regarding our plan.
So to that comment about the smoking canopy, will that be covered, by the landscaping and, so it's not seen from 4 miles, when people are driving down 4 Mile, they see smokers at Amazon?
That would be the intention,
Okay.
is to provide that buffer all along 4 Mile.
I figured, I just wanted to make sure,
Yep.
because nowadays, most companies don't even allow smoking on the property at all because of insurance,
Understood.
so.
If I may, I'll just ask a couple of questions that Scott raised going through.
Yep.
With respect to the geotechnical report, that area coming right onto the Amazon corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Any account for the water that's built up there or pooling there?
Well, I would defer that question to Visser. I know that they have provided some information, but if an additional report is necessary, that would not be a problem to provide that with the approvals for Hendershot. But I'll
Okay.
open it up to Greg or Heath.
Good evening, I'm Heath with Vista Brothers and DEG Development. The ponding that Scott had a picture of was that site was going to grade towards the power lines before we could install the storm sewer, and just at the moment that we were redesigning for Hendershot and Amazon, we got a rain event. I sent Josh Mannion some current pictures from yesterday. After we ran our storm sewer through there, everything for the most part has been dried up. We haven't encountered any groundwater or unstable soils along that whole corridor.
All right, and I guess what's important here is communication with the engineer's office to make sure that they have a chance to take a look at that and can weigh in if there's some concern.
Yeah, I might add too, I talked to Josh today and he shared the picture, and I think our account of the conditions were a little bit different, but we both agreed that a narrative along with compaction testing is probably all we're going to need in terms of the report, and that has to be done with construction of a road anyway, so it's really no inconvenience on them. It's good, prudent engineering on both parts.
Very good, thank you. You have provided the Planning Commission the last couple of days some information on on the movement of contract employees, on-site employees, and the movement on the property. If you could just give us an overview of that information,
Yep.
please.
So I'll speak to it high level, and then I'll defer to Kyle DeGilio with Amazon. There was some talk about 3 shifts. So what those 3 shifts are the employees inside the facility. Those times are 2 a.m. to 12:30, 6 a.m. to 2:30, and 1:30 to 10 p.m. And that's just that's dealing with the truck traffic that is primarily 20 trucks from 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. is when those arrive on site. And it's to prepare the van loading for the van waves that come out. So those are the 3 shifts we've talked about. And then the delivery times are primarily from 9:50 a.m. till 11 is when you're going to be seeing movement, whether that's loading or leaving the site, and coming back between 7:10 and 9:10 p.m. at night. So that's a high-level overview. I'm going to defer to Kyle to make sure I spoke correctly and add any additional detail as necessary.
Sure, no, that's correct on the shift structure. The only thing that I would add is I think the question is directed towards the flex component of employment that we're creating. Is that correct? The contract employees that would be delivering packages for Amazon? A third party?
Well, Kyle, I think, and Scott, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the comment came more as 3 shifts being introduced, and is that going to be more deliveries in the future, meaning we're going to be shifting our time frames that vans would be leaving and coming back. And I think that's the clarity we need to make.
There would be no change in the operation based on the shift structure. So the way that these facilities operate, and this is the case everywhere, and then we certainly can make adjustments based on the feedback from the communities that we're in. But the trucks that are arriving with the inventory of packages that are already package ready to go to customers, those are arriving in the nights and then going out, as was discussed earlier, in vans around 10 a.m. in the morning, and then not returning until after that evening rush. So it's strategic that way. We had inventory coming in, overnight. We, in theory, could send vans out, as soon as that came in. We don't do that. We hold that inventory until we can put the vans out in a way that doesn't disrupt the traffic in the surrounding area.
So that explanation, would it be possible to have that incorporated into the narrative of the overall project? So as we move forward, if you're contemplating changes beyond what you've described, that there's an opportunity to at least interface with city staff so that if it's perceived that there's a need to reassess the traffic impact, that there'd be an opportunity to do that?
Kyle, I'll defer to you and the history on that request being made.
For me, there'd be no issues with that, so we definitely be open to it.
Terry, I had one idea on that after we talked earlier about that, and there's a trip generation chart in the appendix of the traffic study. It's like page 80 or something. It's way in the back, but it shows the different movements that they're talking about there. Maybe we could enter that into the approval and say if there's anything over a 10% increase outside of these parameters, that would require it be revisited. And I think that helps to cover us from some of the things that we've seen around the city with the scattering of, the gray vans going every which way. Because, one of the nice things about this is that we're collecting it all in one point on a truck route close to the highway, and it's more controlled. And I think this would allow you to keep that more controlled so that we don't end up with a conflict with the school or a conflict with, any other movement. So just a suggestion, but I think that might cover where you're headed.
Yes.
And, to comment on that is making sure that we're, utilizing the correct data there and taking into account peak times for Amazon, which are naturally in the October through December time period.
So given that, what the city engineer mentioned, would you be open to having that incorporated into the approval?
Based on Kyle's comment, yes, with the caveat that there needs to be some level of flexibility, whether 10% is the number. I think that's close to it. What we don't want to do is make that decision and have it necessarily be wrong, but we want to allow, I do agree, we should allow for flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question or a couple of questions. I read the report on logistics, and it is good, and I know you guys are doing this all over the place, so I don't doubt that this is a fly-by-night thing. And I know you want to get your vans out fast, and so I like the times you're talking about, but at one time, how many vans are out?
So, Kyle, do you want to speak to the typical and then peak vans that are we're going to be using in this facility?
For sure. So during what we describe as steady state operations, there would be about 230 vans operating daily. So those vans would be, as we discussed before, leaving in waves, so not all 230 at once, around 10 a.m. in the morning. So it takes to get those vans off the site, it takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours to do that. Those vans are covering deliveries for an area that during that time frame that they're out, which is basically an 8 to 10 hour delivery route in about an area that would be a 45-minute drive radius from where this location exists. So extremely local. So if you're living in Walker, your packages will be coming from this location if you're ordering from Amazon.
So then why are there 800 van sites?
So, well, Kyle, I'll let you address that.
Yes, for sure. So we build these to the maximum capacity in our site plan. So the rationale behind those 800 van spaces is really explained pretty simply through, you have 230 vans, drivers, that would be the average daily vans that we're using. We also allow our drivers of those vans to park their personal vehicles on the site. So when they arrive in the morning, they park their cars, they exit their cars, then get into the delivery van. So already there, you're at, conservatively 460 spots. There is peaks throughout the year, so especially around the holiday season that we're approaching right now, when we get into what we describe it as peak season, if you see an increase in demand, then those van numbers would go up during that time frame. So we build in that capacity, very similar to how a shopping center or a mall would build excess capacity for that additional parking that they would need during their busy season. We do the same thing too. So there'd be vans on site that, for the majority of the year wouldn't be fully utilized. And then we also build in excess parking for what we would describe as cycling and maintenance, so that the same vans aren't going out every single day. And hopefully, when we get through, to our electric vehicle fleet in the next, very near future, that maintenance requirement will drop and reduce. But that's why we have the extra spaces there. So hopefully that answers that, but I can't answer more questions.
Yeah, that was the city engineer's second comment was the planning commission should inquire about the rideshare program and how the overall parking numbers within the plan. All we're sitting here is thinking there's going to be 800 vans, and how do you put 800 drivers in the same place at the same time? So that does explain the fluctuation. And I think it answers the question very well. Now, there is not rideshare programs out there, there is not busing. Is there? Is it just people are gonna have to get there by car or dropped off, or that's the plan right now?
That is the plan right now. It's not envisioned for rideshare.
A question, you talked about servicing, are you servicing these vans on site?
Kyle, can you address that? And that's servicing vans on site.
We would do whatever service would be allowed, and it's typically light maintenance. We've done in some cases on-site refueling where we bring a refueling truck through the site to do that. Really, that's something that it depends on the community and the restrictions with each site. I'm less familiar with what the plan would be here and what the regulations are. It's probably better for you, Kyle, but it's very, very light maintenance. We're not doing, oil changes and kind of engine replacements and transmissions on the site.
Second question I have, you have these 2 to 300 van drivers. Do they have access to the sanitary facilities in the building?
Yes, they do.
Yep.
Bathrooms, they all can go in there anytime?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part of the question.
Could they go into the restrooms at any time?
We're not
Yes,
gonna
they
have-
can.
Not gonna have porta potties in the parking lot.
No.
They
We-
have full access to the
This
facility.
leads to the email that we got from a truck driver, because your Amazon facility in Gaines Township, Rapids Drive, is a real shit show. You need to go out there, if you haven't been there, it's basically a truck stop.
Okay.
Quite the no parking signs and motor carrier going out there. And if you're gonna do the same thing here, we're gonna have these semis waiting to get in the queue at this building, parked on the street, and these guys, do they have access to the facilities in the building?
So Kyle, the concern is the Gaines Township AR sort facility, the 1 million square foot facility. And I know that we had talked about, the differences between this delivery station and Gaines Township and how that traffic would be different, specifically regarding trucks. I'll speak at high level. The number of trucks that are entering and exiting that facility is quite large compared to ours. We have 20 trucks per day, and we have enough spots for those truck.
Are those Amazon trucks? Those drivers work for Amazon?
Kyle, can you answer that? Do the truck drivers specifically work for Amazon, or are these all contract?
Those are contract. If I could just provide some additional context there. So the facility in Gaines Township is, and obviously we're looking into that, so the issues that have been brought up here, so thanks for bringing that to our attention. I just want to be clear that that facility is a completely different type of use than what we're looking at here in Walker. So that is a larger fulfillment center. In fulfillment centers, that's where inventory is actually stored. So something that you want to order on Amazon, that item can live in that facility in Gaines Township until it's ready to leave when a customer orders it. So in the instance of a customer order, let's say you order something, that item is picked off the shelf in Gaines, it is boxed at that facility, that box is labeled there, and then it needs to leave to get to our customers. So those trucks that appear to be the issue, which we're looking into, those trucks, if the order that is placed is coming to Walker, would be loaded at that facility, and then as Kyle mentioned, about 20 trucks a day, and they could be coming from a number of different fulfillment centers around the country, would arrive in Walker to unload those packages. So it's not truck traffic that's going to happen in Walker. The Walker facility, I just want to be very clear, is a last mile delivery station, completely different than a fulfillment center. So the items that are coming off those trucks in Walker, they're unloaded, they're sorted by zip codes that represent the delivery area, and then they leave the facility. So there's not a lot of storage of inventory like you see in those other buildings. And because of that regular flow of packages that we have, that's why we are able to pretty accurately describe the kind of rigid schedule that we run every day of, okay, this is when the trucks are going to arrive, this is when vans are going to leave, because we actually have to maintain that to get those packages that are coming in the building overnight out of that building that day so that we can do the same thing the next day.
Do you require the trucks to drop their trailers and the tractors to leave when they back up to this building?
I didn't hear that clearly, I apologize.
Do the drivers drop their trailers when they deliver the product to the building?
No, they do not. So it is truck in, unloaded, and then truck leaves.
Well, you do that in 68th Street too, but the drivers have to leave the trailer at the dock, go outside, when the trailer is empty, then they're allowed back in to get their trailer. My question is, are you gonna do the same thing here?
And the answer is no, is not.
Correct. It's a very good question, though, so thank you for that.
You say you're going from a high level view, then I'm going to go from a high level view also.
Yep.
You've seen the requirements of the city planner.
Yep.
You've seen the requirements of the engineers. Are there red flags that you're not going to be able to meet?
No.
So if we approve this, you say that you're going to do all those things that are in these plans.
Well, I mean, we can address things one by one. I mean, we.
No, I'm just looking for
yeah.
big red flags. Not
Big red flags when I look at, we talked about the 50-50 parking, meaning that 50% is vans and then 50% is the personnel coming in with their cars. So I think that was something that I wanted to make sure was clear. The sidewalks, when we presented this originally, I'm just thinking cost items. That makes sense to me, and that's something that we can do. The 3 shifts, we wanted to make sure that was clear, so no red flags there. Now, the public utility easement, that's easily taken care of. We can deal with that. And then the payments. So we've made sure that the payments that were on the table have already taken place.
you don't have to go through every one. I'm just wondering.
I understand, but these were the big things for us when we were looking at this, and I want to make sure that we've taken them all into account, and not to belabor any points here, but we want to make sure that we're communicating that we have looked through all of these and understood what they mean. The one thing that we want to make sure is we're working on Hendershot Avenue, and our intention is to turn that over prior to operations of this building. That includes work on 4 Mile Road with Kent County and the installation of a northbound traffic signal there. Us building and the facility and that has to be in lockstep, and we can do those concurrently and separate, but from our perspective, we want to make sure that there's no hindrance on our ability to do that, meaning times that we can work on the traffic signal, for instance, or anything like that. We want to be mindful of our neighbors and coordinate that effort with the city, but want to make sure we're not pinned down to 1 week to do this, to coordinate. We want to because construction in Michigan, especially through the winter, is a moving target. So we want to be able to work with the city on that. So that was one thing I wanted to comment on in terms of Hendershot. Other than that, yes, I think the only other thing I noted was the irrigation, and I couldn't agree more. We are, as a new neighbor in Walker, we want to be a good neighbor. So we understand this is a gateway into this new development. So providing that irrigation makes sense, and we can coordinate that, whether it's on our property in the right of way, whatever that means. We can work through those things.
Good, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, can you give us a sense of how the truck movement is coming in and out of the docks that are there on that south side?
So the intention for this development from day one on our side was always to utilize Northridge, the new Northridge Road coming from the east. We've now introduced Hendershot, but that's not the main mode of transportation for the trucks. The intention would be to use Northridge, come in, and then leave that same way.
Since you brought that up, do you have any sense of the movement that will happen on Hendershot with the vans and/or trucks?
So if you take a look at the site plan, the vans are primarily going to be coming in the south, I'll call it the southwest. They'll come in, park, there's a staging area, and then they leave in almost that center curb cut there. So that's the natural path of the vans. How we would utilize Hendershot, for the most part, would be the folks parking in the employee parking, which I'll call is the northeast section of parking. Beyond employees, there are going to be times customers will visit the facility to pick up a package, and that's where they could park as well. Not to say that vans may not leave onto Northridge and their path up Hendershot to 4 Mile may be the best path to their customers. But that's the flow. The flow of vans is primarily going to be off Northridge in on that southwest drive, parking, and then once they leave that parking, you're loading up into these queuing areas and then leaving in that center curb cut.
Explain to me how they load these vans out of this building.
There's a number of at-grade overhead doors where they're brought out on carts and loaded up that way. Kyle, if you want to add any more color to the how the vans are loaded out of the building.
That's pretty accurate. They're brought out into movable carts, and the packages in the overnight hours are sorted to basically the equivalent of hockey bags with packages, and those bags are loaded into the vans, and each van holds about 220 packages that would be delivered that day.
I see them all queued up here, back to front, front to back, and it looks like one has to leave, so the next 4 or 3 can go with it.
Kyle, do you want to explain the queuing nature of the loading process and how they move through that queue?
Yeah, so if you have the site plan in front of you, which I do myself, but I think Kyle has it up there, you can see each of those kind of rectangular shapes. So those are, rows of roughly, I think, 36 vans each. So each of those will be loaded individually. So the darker shaded ones in the site plan, those are the ones that are pulled up to the building. Those are, being loaded in groups, and then once that group is loaded, we basically release the first group there that then would exit the facility. When the next group is loaded, that group is then released to leave the facility in about 20 minutes. It takes about 20 minutes to load each of those groups up. So that's why there's 20-minute increments where vans are exiting the facility.
Well, I'll make the comment, when I looked on the site plan, page 1, and I looked at the parking versus the building, all the rest of the building, there's a whole heck of a lot more vehicles here, and I find it hard to believe that all these additional vehicles have no impact on traffic. I find it really hard to believe.
And Terry, maybe that's a good time for me to jump in because of a couple of the inconsistencies I want to make sure that you guys are aware of and ask the question is, from correspondence we've had back and forth with the engineer that did the traffic study and the site plan. One of them was related to the service that we talked about, and they did say that an additional 30 spaces are dedicated to vans that are being serviced. And so you might want to consider scaling that back a little bit and maybe saying waiting to be serviced or something like that. It would not be productive at all to be out there doing oil changes or changing tires or anything like that. But it might be worthwhile to be clear about that, because if they're waiting for it, that's probably fine. They could be towed away or driven away or something like that. The second thing is related to the peak season, November, December. I don't think that, from my understanding, the peak season wasn't factored into these peak hour traffic projections. And so when you start to look at why are there so many extra spaces, that's a pretty good question, I think, about how does that fit in there? Is this going to be like Alpine Avenue in November, December, where we all know you don't go anywhere near there? So I think that's worth bringing up, because if the shifts all increase, if the volume doubles, that changes things pretty dramatically, and it's worth talking about. And it kind of leads into what Tom's talking about.
So regarding peak, the peak means not, going up to 400 and, 403 vans. It's approximately an additional 115 vans. Then I believe that the peak information was given in the traffic report. Kyle, I want to confirm that number with you, that the standard is 230, but during peak, you guys are envisioning 115 additional.
Correct. If you added, 50% additional volume to that, and we needed to have 50% more vans to attribute, to serving those customers that order those packages, yeah, it's something, I think it's 115 additional vans that we'd use during that time of the year for those 2 months.
And I can see when business is booming, this place will be just packed with vans. To me, I think you need to look at a worst case scenario. Don't go for this happy average and say, if things go gang and this place is full, traffic will be a mess. Like I said, I got a hard time saying this is not really gonna have any impact on the surrounding traffic.
I would just to add to that, and it's a good question, is thinking, the worst case scenario and what's the capacity that we could realistically get out of this site. So these delivery station projects, you're going to be seeing a lot more of them, specifically in the Grand Rapids area and other large metro areas. So where that capacity is coming from, we're not going to jam additional capacity for routes into this facility to serve, Caledonia or downtown Grand Rapids. We'll have facilities in those areas that will handle that. So we have a pretty good predictability of where we think that that demand is going to be at present, where it's going to be in the future. So there wouldn't be a situation where the traffic we're reporting out now is going to, 18 months from now, quadruple, and then we're having to, jam a bunch of additional vans on the site, and it'd be chaos. That's certainly what we want to avoid. So that's why we're building this facility into the maximum capacity that we can get out of it. And it would not be in our interest to try to exceed that capacity in any way. It'd be much easier for us, to be perfectly honest, to open a second site, if you'd have us again, somewhere else in Walker or somewhere else in the area to serve that extra demand.
I still think we need to have a traffic study that projects this thing at full capacity, not a happy average or whatever.
Yeah.
We've done it, we're putting in the signals as it were the worst case.
Yes.
I don't think the study says that.
We are putting, Frank, we're putting in the signals, right? As it's a worst case, the study doesn't even call for the signals to be put in, but we're doing it.
Yes, we are doing that.
Because that's, in
And
case
I'll
it's worst case.
I'll just interject. One, let's not get too deep into hyperbole about how bad the traffic is. I'm concerned that we're requiring all these roads to be built, and then we don't want any traffic on them. That's not the way we should do things. Are there going to be traffic impacts? Absolutely. I think the two engineers are not happy with seeing a report that says a development like this isn't going to have any traffic. Obviously it is. That's why my recommendation in my staff report says, I don't really believe that, and I think you should make conditions of approval on all of the recommendations in the executive summary. So the report may say it has no impact. The executive summary says we should make all these changes. So instead of arguing about, does the study say this or the study says this, the recommendations are the solution. So those should be conditions.
Which I confirm that we are participating in. The installation of the Hendershot Road, the signal at 4 Mile, and the participation with Fruit Ridge and Northridge. So that's our commitment to addressing the traffic concerns.
Any other comments or questions for the applicant?
When was the traffic study done? It looks to me in the
It was updated and given to us, I believe, on September 28th, or at least the date was September 28th. I don't think that we got, I don't think we ever got a paper sealed copy of it, but we did get it just before the report deadline for this meeting. So it was not reviewed in advance. It's been reviewed since then in some detail, but it's really hot off the press.
Well, Josh, you want to comment on, we utilized the existing traffic study that was done by Visser, and we updated that traffic study based on our impact.
Yeah, that's correct. The background traffic data on there is from when Visser was going through the traffic study when Northridge development was being done. So that background traffic is what was used for the traffic study.
The date of the actual study, when they were studying movements of cars, though, when was that done?
That I'd have to look at the data. I don't know if you recall, Greg, when that was, otherwise I'd have to check.
I can help you with that because we met with their engineers and said you're not going to get good data in the COVID environment. So they
Plus,
used,
if there's no kids in school at the time
Right,
that they're doing
right.
it.
So they used some old data, old meaning like a year or two old, and some Visser data and blended that together with some appropriate factors because we knew that we couldn't get reasonable information.
Okay. All right, I think we're approaching a point that this is a public hearing this evening. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing?
I'll make a motion to open public support.
Motion by Tyler, supported by Jason, to open the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. If there's anyone in the public that would wish to come forward and offer any comments.
Hi, my name's Laura Tripp. My husband and I live on 4 Mile 3010, so we're literally 4 houses down from this development. And we just heard about it a couple days ago. We had seen some action going on down there and kind of wondered what was going on. And we knew with the industrial park going through the Northridge Drive, we knew that always was going to happen, but it was quite a surprise to hear that it was going to be coming through the Hendershot. So that was when we kind of, our red flags went up and thought, we better go to this meeting and find out what's going on. I would like to say, I think it's a great development. I think it's going to be great job opportunities. I think it's going to help Amazon be more efficient in their distribution. We're not anti-Amazon. I like my Amazon too. I would also like to echo what the previous speaker said earlier on his comments on how fast we develop Walker. Part of the reason my husband and I moved out here was because we liked the country setting next to Alpine Avenue. We could just jog down the road. We were at Sam's Club, we're at Meyer. Our kids go to school right there at Walker Charter. We like the Kenowa Hills School District. That was part of why we moved here. We also really like the wildlife in our backyard and surrounding area, and our neighbors have echoed this. So I kind of wonder, when I look at this picture, you can't really see it, and I kind of wonder if there are still some natural throughways for the wildlife that is still remaining here in Walker. I don't know if I know there's another map that we were looking at earlier from the gentleman here, I can't remember his name, sorry, that had all the different zonings and how the agricultural had just switched over to industrial. With all the industrial going in down the road between Walker and Bristol, it kind of surprised me to see this all of a sudden switch over to industrial. I guess in regards to the traffic, which we've kind of been beating with a stick here, I think one of the things I didn't hear was, are all the semis from this plant always going to use Northridge? And is there any way that the way this is constructed with those driveways to ensure that those semis are not going to try to switch up Hendershot? That would be one question I have. I know that the space between on Walker Avenue between 4 Mile and Northridge is a no truck route. Having driven there for 7 years, I see trucks down there all the time. So it's just one thing that concerns me. It's a narrow road. I don't really it's, to me, too much big traffic in a small space. And then with regards to the traffic lights going in, there's so many traffic lights that have been added in that area just in the last 7 years since we've lived here. I find it almost incredible that they almost never turn to blinking yellow at night. And it slows down traffic. It makes everybody stop when there's one car turning. I don't know who's in charge of the traffic light management, but that would be one other question I would like addressed. As far as this light at Hendershot, I do notice that one turns to blinking yellow. That's one of the few that does. But then there are other ones, if we're adding one at Fruit Ridge, is there gonna be an off-peak hours time when we know there's not much traffic coming through that we can turn that light off to keep that Fruit Ridge traffic moving? I don't drive around at night a whole lot, but I know that when I want to get home late at night, I want to get home, and stopping at a red light for no traffic seems kind of silly. The couple other things I wanted to know, and maybe this was already, I should know this perhaps, there's the other Amazon distribution center off of 3 Mile on Walk-In. Is that going to remain open while this is open, when this opens? So you'll have 2 different hubs with 2 different sets of vans coming through distributing Amazon products, or is that hub closing and this is replacing it? So that was the other question I had. And then also, is this also operating 7 days a week, 365? Does it close ever, or is it every day, all day? It appears from the hours that were described earlier that they're closed from about 10 p.m. until 2 a.m. There's going to be no traffic in and out of there at that time. And I guess, 20 semis a day doesn't really sound like that much to me, but I'm curious what time of day they come in, if they come in at 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. Honestly, semi noise up and down the road is kind of annoying. I was kind of glad when Roth closed. Let's see here. And then the other thing too, especially with that other Amazon hub, one of the big things that we noticed is the Big Meyer gas station there on Walker Avenue. Obviously, it has a huge influx of Amazon trucks at their peak hours, which happen to be 8 a.m. a lot of times. And other times when I'm coming through there, I notice a lot of those trucks coming through. I noticed the big Citgo up on Fruit Ridge. That may help alleviate some of that. They have the new gas station there. I just didn't know if they had a specific place they were directed to go, or if they were just coming back, or just going to wherever they find convenient. Those were pretty much, I know that was a lot of questions really quick, but I just thought if I can get those all out there, if anybody has answers to those questions, I would love to hear that. This is a really big change for our community, and while I know there's positives, there's, from our perspectives, there's some negatives too, So, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Before we move to the next comment, the applicant, if you can, I couldn't keep track of the number of questions there.
Well, and I'll try to remember them all, but the first one I remember is the other facility, Kyle DeGiulio. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is not shutting down?
That's correct. That we were going to keep that facility open.
Okay.
And operating the same way, meaning the vans that are parked all over town, they're also coming in from those other areas, they're not using this parking lot?
Correct. So that facility is the same type of delivery station operation that this new proposed facility would be. That facility would represent a different delivery area, so different zip codes than this one would. So it wouldn't be doubling the vans on the area that it is now. It's just when this new facility opens, those routes will be replaced by vans at this facility in Walker.
And Kyle, to elaborate on that, when you guys are looking at these facilities, you're looking to not overlap the 45-minute radius, correct? So this facility is going to be focused on new homes or on its own 45-minute radius, correct?
For sure. So that if you're just looking at the map, this facility north of 96 there should serve zip codes that are north of the highway there, and the existing facility would then shift their zip codes to facilities south, and then they cover those areas that no overlap.
And then regarding the traffic, the times, and again, these vans are leaving between, I believe, call it 9:50 and 11 o'clock, and coming back between 7 and 9. So while there are folks in the facility 100% of the time, the comings and goings are limited. Now, you still may have some of the the flex employees that are delivering out of their own vehicles coming in, but that's minimal comparatively to the vans. And then the truck traffic is between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. is when you would see that. Now, are you getting 20 trucks at 10 p.m.? No, they're moving in and out throughout the evening.
But they were gonna use Northridge, right?
That's the intention, yeah. So to give a little context, before looking at this site, we were just contemplating Northridge being there and having access off of 4 Mile specifically for our employees that are going to be in the building, so car parking. Now, through the process, that connection's been made. That's part of the master plan. So we're participating in that by funding that between our development is funding that. So that connection was a request, and we are participating in it. Did I get them all?
There was a question on the refueling. There was a question on the refueling. Right now, the Meyer gas station takes, I go by all the time too, and you can see all the vans getting filled up.
Yes.
Are all the vans at this facility going to be electric? I mean, is that why all the charging stations are being set up?
So I'll answer that question first. And Kyle, please elaborate. But we're putting in the infrastructure to move to all electric vehicles. So the infrastructure will be there. When Amazon makes that change to be determined, they don't have to do any additional work beyond putting the charging stations in. So Kyle, is that accurate for?
That's correct. The goal would be once we have our fully electric fleet, which those vehicles from Rivian, which we purchased from Rivian based in Michigan, those should start rolling out off their assembly line next year. And as soon as we get those off the assembly line, there's 100,000 of them that we purchased, and then we'll start distributing them through our network. So at some point, I can't confirm when or not the date would be. There's too many external factors, but the goal is to have this facility 100% electric when we have the vehicles ready for it.
And then regarding the fueling, I know, Kyle, you had mentioned earlier that there could be some on-site refueling, but that's not the primary mode. Kyle, do you want to speak to that?
So if the concern is with the vans fueling up off-site and causing problems at the Meyer, for example, we can, and we're open to doing on-site fueling where it's a truck comes in and fuels up the vans after they continue their route. So that would generally happen in the evening. Both work for us. It's really just whatever the community wants. And some communities don't want fueling on site. They'd rather us go to the gas station. So we can work with whatever you need there.
But those vans are all subcontractors. They're not Amazon employees or Amazon vehicles.
They are contractors.
They are leased from Amazon.
Amazon owns the vehicles and other companies lease the vans from you?
Yes, so when we open a facility like this, in our, what we describe the third party, the delivery service partners who are the owners of those individual delivery businesses, they lease the vans that they are operating from Amazon. So they lease their current Ford Transit vans, Mercedes Sprinter vans from us, and then in the future they will lease the Rivian electric vehicles from us.
Sorry, to be clear, the electrical charging stations for those electric vehicles will be on site?
Yes.
So the electrical grids, the power grid is being facilitated to support all that extra power going there?
Well, yeah, let me be clear. They will be on site in the future. What we're doing is putting the underground infrastructure in so that no additional construction beyond pulling wire and placing those. Now, we've already checked with the local electric. There's enough power there to provide that in the future.
So, I have a quick question. What time do the employees show up to work to drive these vans? Because if they're leaving at 9, they're going to show up at 7.
So no, they're leaving at 9:50 is the intent. They arrive at 9:20. So again, they're going to park next to their van, get out of the van, take that into the queuing. So it's just kind of moving from one vehicle to the next, so there's not a lot of time in between getting into their van and getting into the queue. And Kyle, please, please make sure I said that right. And that was just, the question was, if you didn't hear it, what time do the van drivers show up?
I said employees.
Well, so there's vans, but then there's also employees. So I'll go back to that, what I had mentioned earlier. Let me get to my notes here. Yeah, so even the 3 shifts that we talked are all off-peak. Okay.
Okay. Do we have any other comments or questions on this project?
We have an online or an email that came in from Mike Gowron from 1454 Trinidad Avenue that would like to enter into the record. It's essentially making a comment that Tom was referencing earlier in regards to the truck movement and truck drivers at the Gates Township facility.
If there's no other public comment, I'll entertain a motion to close the hearing.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Motion by Pat, supported by Steve, to close the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. We've covered a lot of ground. Remember way back when Frank was up and his introductory comments and his recommendations in before you for this project? And we've had a lot of conversation as well concerning points raised by Scott Connors in there. Do we have any pending issues with respect to what we've discussed this evening? Tyler?
I've been on board here at Walker for 15 years, and I appreciate you not wanting green space to fill up. Of course, I don't, but business. The Northridge plat has been platted for, I don't know how many years. This has been planned for more years than I've been on the board. So I'm sorry that it's a shock to you, but it's been planned for umpteen years, and this is just fleshing it out and getting it done. So I just want to make sure that this isn't just a bomb drop on the neighbors or anybody around. This is a huge, long process. And to get Northridge to go through has been a dream of the cities for 3 years. So all of this is nice to see. I just want to make that comment, and I do appreciate everybody wants their green space. So.
Thank you.
I have a question, Scott. We referenced the lady's comment about no trucks going up the 4 mile line, Hendershot extension. The plan says this to be built to industrial road section, so is it the intent to leave that open to trucks?
Well, I think you're the expert. I think you've got 3 different hats that I've seen you wearing on 4 Mile Road and Kent County's. I don't think Kent County restricts truck traffic on all weather roads, which that is, correct?
4 miles is not all weather.
Okay, so does Kent County allow trucks on that road?
On 4 mile, yeah, until weight restrictions go on.
Okay. Our road will be an industrial road. I don't think they gain anything by bringing a truck up or down that road. It's much quicker to use Northridge. Their traffic generation appears that they'll intend to use that. But, one of the things that I think Frank's been striving for with the master plan is redundancy, because you never know what's going to happen if a tree falls down, if there's an accident, roads under construction, any of those things. There might be times where a truck might need to go up there, but it's not going to be more efficient.
She referenced Walker Avenue, that the city does not allow trucks from Northridge to 4 mile. I think she was asking for the same thing on this piece of Hendershot extension. Or given that consideration. My question is, would that happen?
That sounds like a policy decision that the commission would have to weigh in on, not a staff person.
Any other issues, questions? We have before us a recommendation from the Community Development Director as well as the City Engineer. I think there's, in large part, if not in all parts, the applicant was acknowledging the points that have been raised, was in agreement with those. I think there's one detail. There was talking about the number of vehicles on site to be serviced and waiting, and I guess that's the case. Does the servicing take place on site, or are these that are going to be serviced going to be taken off the site for whatever is needed for them?
You want me to speak to that?
Please.
So Kyle, the question relates to the vehicles that are waiting to be serviced, or the allotment that we've given for servicing. And maybe you can address that, but I know that you said that sometimes those vehicles are just taken out of service to give them a break. And so they may sit in those stalls for a period just to kind of come out of rotation. Take your pitchers out of rotation, might as well take vehicles too. But Kyle, do you want to speak to that, to those maintenance spots that you guys have envisioned?
Yeah, that's correct, that those vehicles could just be, in some cases, be fully functioning, and because we brought extra cars onto the site or something, I'm from Michigan, you all know that in the wintertime, for example, you need to, keep your car running, you can't just let it sit there, so that's why we have those extra spots, is it's just a buffer for those cars that we need to cycle through to keep it running throughout the year.
Okay. Thank you. With that, is anyone prepared to offer a motion?
I'll make a motion, case number 20-872, motion for the delivery station, DEG Lot 8 final area site plan. I make a motion to approve North Ridge East IPUD final area site plan for Lot 8, which will allow the development of a package delivery and sorting center based on a site plan set and supporting materials provided by the applicant. Planning Commission review on 10/7/2020. The final area site plan includes the following lots and parts of one lot as currently identified: 3360 4 Mile Road, 3320 4 Mile Road, 3190 4 Mile Road, northerly part of 3384 4 Mile Road. Conditions of lot 8 final area site plan approval. Developer agrees to all conditions noted in the city community development director staff report dated 9/29/2020. Number 2, developer agrees to all conditions noted in the city engineer staff report dated, what was that dated, Scott?
Like the,
9/30. Yes. 2020. Findings of fact for section 94-219 and 94-213. The Northridge East IPUD as detailed on the final area site plan continues to meet the standards obtained in subsection 3G regarding preliminary area site plan content and does meet any other applicable standards for review. Final area site plan is in substantial compliance with the previously approved preliminary site plan consisting of the maps and accompanying written materials required under subsection 2 of section 94-213. The final area site plan complies with the uses permitted by the Northridge East IPUD and any prohibitions of specific use by the Planning Commission pursuant to section 94-213(3). Appropriate service by public water and sewage, utilities, public roads, and other essential services will be available for immediate use by the occupants of Lot 8. Lot 8 will have direct access to the public collector or arterial street. All future uses on Lot 8 will be designed, constructed, and operated to comply with the performance standards as provided by Article 15 of the Walker zoning ordinance. Loading docks and truck maneuvering areas will be designed and located so as not to adversely affect adjacent and neighboring lands or uses due to noise, odor, light, or other external effects. except as otherwise expressly approved by the planning commission, all permitted principal uses on lot 8 must be conducted within a completely enclosed building, except for loading and unloading operations on-site, parking of vehicles, and the reasonable storage of materials and products which are related to principal use of lot 8 as shown on your final area set plan. Is there any, conditions of approval that I missed?
Do we have that 10%?
I didn't understand that one, so.
Yeah, but didn't we?
That was part of the traffic study, where they had a graph or notation stating the timing. For the vehicles, that would be a certain time.
Right. We threw out 10%, but I know what was negotiation.
If material changes in the traffic conditions, then they would have to revisit the traffic study. I believe is what I gathered out of that.
It was merely a suggestion because I think, you want to make sure that it's somewhat reasonable and tied to what they provided in the study. But that relates to peaks, it relates to increases, in the traffic study, there's a trip generation chart that shows 309 vans a day. And if you were to use that number and then add a buffer onto it, that's way better for staff. Because I think,
State that.
well, but how do you want to state it?
I think we need to do.
Or do you want to state it? You might not.
I don't want to state it, so I'll leave my motion as it is.
We have a motion on the floor. Is there support? Support by Steve. Conversation.
I'd like to see that number put in there somehow. To revisit it if they go over that number of the vans in that study.
The question is, how would that, okay, so you would like to see additional,
How you do it, but we need to add that if there's 10% over what the number of vans used in the study becomes a business model out there, then we need to revisit the traffic study and see.
I don't disagree with you, Tom, at all. I just don't know what that number should be. And to make an arbitrary number, to me, is not a good thing.
10% over the number used in the study. Study was 309, so that makes it 332.
So are you offering an amendment to my motion?
I'll amend that, I'll make that amendment to the motion.
okay, there's an, now this is where Robert's rules, I get a little bit,
You have to take the amendment and vote on it. Have a second first of all, then you have to vote on it. And then it goes into my motion, and then we vote on the motion.
okay, all right. So we have a proposed amendment to the approval to incorporate a 10% factor to the projected traffic analysis that's been offered. Is there support? You're looking for,
Make a comment, because it is changing the agreement that, so, just as we're working through these numbers, I just want it noted that we are participating in, changes to the traffic signals, et cetera, Hendershot Road, and Fruit Ridge and North Ridge that didn't come up during that. So we are participating. So I'd like that what I had stated was 115 plus 230. I'd like that to be, during our peak season, be the peak. Because we are going over and above what the traffic study stated. And if that could be the number, then I think that we could be in it if we're
That's 345.
345. So I'd like to see that be, because that's our stated peak that we stated here tonight, that at least be the number if this motion is going to move forward. I do want to mention that we are participating in both Fruit Ridge and North Ridge traffic signal, as well as Hendershot Road is being fully funded by this development.
Tom's amended number would be 340, and I don't think we're going to count the difference between 5 cars, 5 vans.
What happens if they go over that is the question. Do they have to come to the city and say, hey, we're planning on doing this? Or were you saying they can't do it? It's a ceiling.
We need to have another traffic analysis, see if there's anything
Just, if we could, please. In terms of, I believe what was intended here was to set a mark in which there'd be communication between the developer back to city staff to understand the direction that you'd wish to go, and not necessarily come back to the planning commission, but keep that line of communication open between the developer and the city to keep tabs on that.
And I think what I'm getting at is just because we hit that number and it's communicated to you doesn't trigger something. You have to understand that if there's if there truly is not a large traffic impact, or there's, no pain, we're not in the business to just do traffic study after traffic study. So, we're open to that communication, obviously. We want to make sure that everything is flowing nicely, because us being efficient with the vans and being efficient with deliveries is the business. So we want to make sure of that as well. Kyle, do you want to expand on what I've said anymore?
I think, I agree with the point that Kyle's made. I mean, I completely recognize the rationale behind putting a number next to it. I do think that what concerns me at Amazon is, what if there is that event that, like we're in now at COVID, where suddenly that peaks because there's increased demand because people can't go to grocery stores, and we have 400 vans that day. What happens to us, and just that level of uncertainty isn't great.
I don't have any heartburn if you did it over for a couple days, a week or that, but when it's day in and day out and you doubled your traffic over what your study was, then that's like, you've got a lot of space here for vans.
Okay, we've got a question by Steve.
So the theory behind this is we plug that number in, and if we're seeing issues, we would then do counts on how many vans we're seeing on the site. But we would probably not go and do those counts unless we're seeing traffic issues anyways, correct?
Yeah, Steve, you're looking at me, so I'm going to assume that because I brought this up, I'm the idiot that doesn't have any friends at the end of the night. So, my thought is, and Frank should chime in here, but you'd have to get over 500 vans a day, in my humble opinion, before we would even notice a difference, right? And then I think I've heard so many complaints about the way that things work today and how they're coming out of every nook and cranny, that I think this just helps us to make sure that that doesn't happen here without at least some control. Because they're coming from existing industrial businesses that they just kind of popped in and started to populate and use, and we didn't have any say. So this would just give you the level of comfort to say, let's update that study. It wouldn't have to be a new study. They could update the numbers quite easily. And you could determine if there's a level of service issue that you need to have addressed someplace.
So I'm clear on the theory with them. So my thinking is that probably does make sense, because if there's not any traffic issues, which I don't suspect there will be with the way this is designed, I think they're going to design controls and the site plan to mitigate the traffic being a problem in the areas where it's really inflated some type of action on our part. I think it would be fine. I don't have a problem for it on here.
So, is there a support then for the amendment? Okay, we've got an amendment up for under consideration to supplement to, I don't know how to express that at this point. In something in excess of 10% of the numbers in the projected traffic analysis.
The peak numbers.
Peak numbers. Okay. Is there understanding of that? And if there is,
I won't be quite specific with that. So when I'm saying peak numbers are 345 is the number that we're giving. So if we're in excess of 10% of that number, correct?
If 345 is the number in the report, and pull that out, look at that.
309 is the number. So 10% would be 340.
and that would just trigger at this point communication between the applicant and the city to just get a gauge on what direction that may be going, whether this is a blip on the screen or if that's a trend that will be growing going forward. And we'd want to have that communication between the city and the applicant to monitor that and, if need be, determine whether some type of a supplemental traffic analysis would be helpful to guide future decisions.
Question, Terry. The other facility that's in Walker right now, what peak is that? I mean, are you getting numbers higher than you planned for that facility? Or are they,
Kyle,
can that
can you-
facility take on some of this facility if we start reaching, 400 vans a day or 500 vans a day?
Kyle, can you speak to the capacity of the other Walker site?
The other center in Walker doesn't have much capacity that would be absorbed by, that could absorb from here. What I can say is that we are opening and exploring other sites in the Grand Rapids region for future facilities that would fill that capacity. So there would be no intention of expanding this site beyond what we're presenting today.
Okay, we got a motion on the floor to amend the motion on the floor. Any questions? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Present.
Okay, the amended motion passes. And now we've got the main motion with the conditional approval of the project in accord with the city engineer and the community development director's recommendations. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Sorry. Was there support on Tyler's original?
Steve did. Yep. So, motion passes. Thank you very much for your patience and your participation this evening. We'll take a 5-minute break here.
I had nice pork with sauerkraut and baked taters and carrots. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have brought that up. But I had.
Could we please reconvene?
I can't hardly get my wife to cook it. She doesn't like sauerkraut. Will you take that pork and you slow cook it with that sauerkraut?
Could we please reconvene? Okay, next item on the agenda is site plan review with 3116 North Wilson Court Northwest, addition to 45,372 square foot addition to existing industrial building for West Pharma. And this is not a hearing, but we are having a public review and discussion, but there will not be a time set aside specifically for public comment. With that, I turn the floor over to Tricia Anderson, our planning director.
Okay, so after all that excitement, we are now looking at site plan review for an addition to an existing building. So just to go over the actual request and the property itself. So the action requested of the Planning Commission tonight is to review the site plan for a proposed 43,372 square foot addition to the existing building, which is 104,840 square feet, and related site improvements for West Pharma, and to provide an approval with or without conditions, denial, or tabling of the request. Again, this subject site is at 3116 North Wilson Court. The zoning district is MP, which is Industrial Park. The lot size is 9.6 acres. The future land use designation is industrial. In the 2020 draft is business, which also is in line with enterprise. The location of the project site is just north of Wilson Avenue on North Wilson Court, kind of sandwiched between a rest area along I-96 and Wilson Avenue. And it's located within the North Wilson Commerce Park. We have Cheryl Scales, who's representing the applicant. I understand that Cheryl can't be here tonight, and we have Ken in her place, who will be speaking on behalf of the owner of West Pharma. So the existing conditions, as I noted, this site is sort of sandwiched between the highway and it's surrounded by other industrial zone properties and uses. And just a little bit of background on West Pharma, the company itself. They provided a really nice narrative which allowed them to do a little bragging with some of the awards that they've won over the years for the manufacturing and design of the products that they create. And I learned through looking through their website a little bit that their global manufacturing, design, and production for integrated containment and delivery systems for injectable medicines. They probably maybe manufactured some products that I had to experience the other day when I had an injection for a contrast dye. Maybe that's probably TMI. So the Walker site employs 275 people, and the operations are 24/7 and 365 days a year. Their proposed addition will be adding 60 new jobs, if I'm understanding that correctly. It was also noted in the applicant's narrative that the Walker site played an integral role in manufacturing components for COVID-19 diagnostic testing kits. So I think that's an important thing to point out with a business that's right here in our community. Just a few staff report highlights. Overall, this is a pretty straightforward request. The applicant has addressed most of the concerns that we had, which weren't really all that intense. And so, just to give you a summary of the improvements, as we said, they're proposing a 43,372 square foot building addition to house a clean room. They'll be adding 28 additional parking spaces and restriping of existing spaces. They'll be adding a bit of site landscaping. They're also adding a COVID entry vestibule, adding new mechanical equipment, at-grade truck loading area, additional landscaping, and additional pole and wall pack lighting. Now, the applicant who is here tonight, Ken, on behalf of West Pharma, who's with Progressive AE, he will be going through some changes that they'd like to propose to the plan that was submitted and included in your site plan. But I'm going to hopefully clarify how that whole process is going to work toward the end when I give my recommendation here. So just some of the items from my staff report. As far as landscaping goes, typically the city's opportunity to have a site comply with our ordinance standards that may not be in compliance when they apply for these improvements. This is our opportunity to say, hey, where can we have you get in compliance? This is an existing site. It's largely a developed site with the exception of the rear of the building where they're proposing to add the addition. What they've asked for is a 5-foot buffer zone planting requirement waiver from the Planning Commission. And they've also asked for parking lot and landscape island requirements be waived. Their rationale for asking for the waiver of the buffer zone planting requirements is that the nature of their business being that they produce medical supplies, they've got some heightened FDA requirements, and so their thought is that additional landscaping and vegetation would also bring additional pests or guests that would inhabit that vegetation. So they would like to get away from that. Staff is generally in support of this request, and we can understand that any FDA regulations that need to be followed, if it requires that landscaping or additional plantings are waived, we're okay with that. As far as the landscape island, the parking lot landscape island requirements, if you drive out to the site, you'll see some areas where there typically would be a landscape island in the parking lot, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for this site to retroactively add them, since they weren't added off the bat when this site was originally developed in 1997. So again, staff is comfortable with that request as well. Just a few notes on lighting. Overall, the photometric plan that was submitted is acceptable, but there are just a few details that are lacking in terms of the fixture specifications. We also don't have any information on the existing lighting. So we'd like to see some photometrics that relate to the existing pole and wall pack lighting on the site. And then we ask that the Planning Commission allow the applicant to work with staff to submit an acceptable lighting plan that meets our ordinance standards prior to the issuance of a building permit. With regard to parking, as mentioned, they'll be adding some parking spaces, but they also are planning on restriping some of the parking. And so I had a question that I think the applicant will be able to clarify a little bit here. The dimensional notes in here on the existing parking don't comply with what our parking section in our ordinance requires in terms of stall depth and aisle width. So I would ask that the applicant clarify whether they're planning on restriping the parking lot to comply with the zoning ordinance standards or what they're planning to do. So at this time, I think we could have Ken sort of go through some of the changes that you are proposing on the site. I don't know if you wanted me to pull up the plan, or if you have a plan that you want to put on, or if you want to just talk about it.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, actually, if you could put the site plan up.
Okay.
That's submitted, that's fine. As Tricia mentioned, my name is Ken Branson, and project manager with Progressive AE. She mentioned that Cheryl could not be here. She is not, but I am accompanied by David Scholl, a principal at the firm, and then we're also represented by several of our clients here from West Pharma, if you'd care to hear anything from them. So the markup that we provided in review of the site plan, the current proposed paved area to the west and northwest of the facility, we would like to propose that as gravel. Given the use of it not being part of a normal business, but more to support maintenance and change out of equipment, and also to support access by the fire department, we're looking to install that in gravel instead of the pavement. And that's been shared with staff as well as communicated with the fire chief directly on that effort. The remaining items and recommendations, we anticipate that we will comply and put all that detail together as part of the formal update. And that's really the only substantial change from what's been submitted so far.
Okay. So I'm noticing here that the size of the building is 48,155 square feet, and that's a little bit different than, isn't that different from what we had on our plan? Right here, 48,155.
Yeah, and I believe, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So the square footage shown on the plan is correct. We failed to update the write-up when we resubmitted with the request of additional bump out fees. Where are you asking to use gravel instead of paving?
The northwest portion of the site. So coming off the main entry, off the parking in the front. Everything's shown that's shaded here on the northwest. Yeah, on the screen it's highlighted as well.
You want gravel or are you doing a truck turning?
The activity that happens there is on a more of a maintenance basis for any new equipment that might come in to support capacity. So it's not a regular occurrence.
So if I could just clarify a little bit, what they're asking to do here is instead of build this truck driveway and associated truck docks and associated paved surface and associated parking areas, they're proposing to eliminate that and have this be a 20-foot wide maintainable surface for a fire lane. So I'll go over procedurally how we can address this. But the plan that you have before you that was included in your packet is the plan that you will be voting on. So how we address this change, so my recommendation is to have the planning commission vote to approve or deny or approve with conditions the site plan that was provided in the packet, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. There's a section in the site plan approval section of the ordinance 94-287 allows the planning director to approve minor changes to an approved site plan for a reduction in size of a building. In this case, it's the removal of the additional truck dock and the change of the truck drive to a fire lane, removing impervious surfaces, and also removing parking spaces. What I would like to have clarified is if the size of the addition is bigger, because that I don't have the authority to approve administratively. I only have the authority to approve reductions in the building size or reduction in developable areas.
And I think that's something we need to confirm, because I believe as well in the 48, I believe we're counting the mezzanine level, the mechanical mezzanine on the inside. No?
The original draft submittal, David Shaw, we have Progressive 80. The original draft submittal was for the square footage you quoted. Jerry, when we finalized the submittal, we expanded to the east and updated that square footage size on the plans that were submitted. I think the error is in not having updated your write-up to correspond with the correct square footage.
Okay.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yep, I do. Yep, so this will effectively be the third change since the original submittal. So the planning commission didn't see the original plan or the second revision, but they're seeing now the third change. So the second revision is what you would have had in your planning commission packets. I'm just going to pull up that plan just so that we can.
My humble opinion, we should table this and they can get everything square and so we can see what they really want to do.
The plans on C201 call out the square footage of 48 and 55. I think it's just the right up there on presentation.
Yeah, if they want to get rid of the paved driveway and all that good stuff, and it's like, you know.
The driveway will remain, as will the dock. It's changing the surface from asphalt to gravel. That's the proposed change.
So on page C301, the building addition shows 45,372. On page C201, it shows 48,155.
Because you're requesting gravel surface, and that's against the ordinance, and I know what Scott's feelings are on that, and, yeah, we asked on behalf of what you said originally, that what they are approving is for what is submitted, which is the paved surface, and if that's what is to be done, then I think, the owner would be prepared to.
The plans I have before me are contradicting their own self, so.
On square footage, you're saying, or other than?
On square footage, on all of it, I want to see it put in a regular plan.
I got a question. There was a statement made that the fire marshal or the fire chief had was accepting of a non-paved fire lane in this case?
That's correct. He's connected with Cheryl last Friday.
Okay.
Can I get that in writing?
Yes, we will be able to get that in writing from,
before I approve the plan.
oh,
As Scott, city engineer, weighed in on that also.
so Scott had to leave, but he indicated that he was not comfortable with the stormwater calculations, and that the numbers need to be ran to ensure that the site meets the discharge allowance from the original pond design. So this site drains into a regional detention pond that collects surface water from the area, or from that industrial park. And so that was his main comment that he wanted to get across. That's something that could be worked out during the stormwater permitting process. But I think it's important to get a better feel for, as Tyler said, it might be a better idea to table any action until we get a clear picture on the actual number of the addition. Because if the building, if the addition does not change in size, we can approve or we can review the changes or the reduction in development administratively. But otherwise, what you're asking is for the planning commission to be reviewing and make a motion to either approve or deny or approve with conditions the plan that they had in their planning commission packet, or to table.
I'll make a motion that we table the case until we can get the right numbers and consistent plans and documentation of agreements.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to table action, to reconcile the plans in terms of area and the surface conditions, and have that documentation from the fire chief and the city engineer addressed in the interim as well. Got a motion, okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion about the motion?
What does that do for timing? Does this get pushed by a month?
No, so we don't have public hearing notice requirements for this particular request. So we can put you on the next agenda, which will be 2 weeks from now.
Okay, bring it to a question. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. If you have any clarification on where we go next, if you could get together with Tricia and Scott, and then we should be ready perhaps in a 2-week period. All right, the last item on the agenda is a public hearing. It's on a proposed ordinance amendments regarding mobile food vendors, chapters 22 and 94 of the Walker City Code of Ordinances. Tricia, if you could lead us into that, please.
So this is a public hearing. Just wanted to make sure that that is known. We're holding this public hearing right now, even though we won't have any public comment. So I just wanted to go through the background of where all these amendments are coming from. So after COVID hit, we had the outdoor seating amendments to the zoning ordinance to allow for that as a temporary use because of the occupancy restrictions. And so some businesses were wanting to have food trucks. So in particular, we have a brewery on Remembrance called Lost Art Brewing. And they had some food trucks who we said, you know, we have to go through the process as the way the ordinance is written now. The food trucks are grouped in with solicitors. And so they have to go through the long, lengthy process of a background check and all kinds of the same kind of thing that an ice cream truck would be subject to, or somebody who's going door to door selling things. You want to make sure you don't have, a pedophile roaming around your neighborhood selling ice cream. So our food trucks are a little bit different than that, in that they're invited to the places that they are selling their food, like this brewery in particular. So the process was a little bit laborious, and so in an effort to kind of remove some of these barriers to business in Walker, we got the ordinance committee together on August 24th and said, okay, let's talk about drafting an ordinance that would remove food trucks or mobile food vendors as solicitors, and instead have them maybe grouped in with businesses. So instead of going through the solicitor's license process, they would go through the business license process. So the ordinance committee gave clear direction to staff to draft some ordinances that would make all the changes that were discussed. And then some draft ordinances were brought to the ordinance committee on September 28, which removed mobile food vending from solicitors and the definitions, and we added some, we kind of refined all of the application requirements for mobile food vending and the temporary use section of the zoning ordinance. And then we had some further discussion at the September 28 meeting where the clerk's office was adamant about removing mobile food vending from having to have a business license altogether. And so what I did was I drafted some ordinances and I gave you the redlined version. So what you have in front of you are the changes that I made to Chapter 22, businesses. And in keeping with the direction of the ordinance committee, I removed basically all of the references to I removed mobile food vendors as solicitors. I also removed the requirements for mobile food vendors to register as a business in Chapter 22. And then what I ended up doing is removing all the references to Chapter 22 within Chapter 94 in Section 523, which goes through temporary uses. And then I added some application standards that would have typically been handled in the clerk's office through the business license process, and put them under the temporary use permit application requirements. I also removed the requirement for city commission or other public body to approve a temporary use on public property. Seemed a little bit unnecessary. And then I cleaned up some other areas within the temporary use section that reference the building official shall have discretion. I changed all those to the zoning administrator because obviously the building official doesn't process the applications for temporary uses. And then one other random thing I found in there, we allow for roadside stands as temporary uses, and oftentimes those roadside stands are accompanied by the sale of eggs that were produced on that property. And so I added that eggs can be sold as an item that can be sold at a roadside stand if it's in conjunction with an approved backyard chicken permit. And added mobile food vending permissions on vacant lots zoned public, semi-public. And I also added that mobile food vending can be located on private or public property. Because before it stated that it could only be located on private property. So we have had some situations in the past where somebody wants to set up shop in one of our city parks, and at this point in time we feel like that's an okay use. So my recommendation, and Steve, you can probably chime in here, is to take into consideration any possible unintended consequences that might arise from removing the requirement for mobile food vendors to operate as a business and obtaining a business license in the city of Walker. So essentially what these amendments would do is remove any requirement for mobile food vendors or food trucks to have to apply for a business license. And then number two, it's recommended that the planning commission discuss this and decide if they foresee any unintended consequences with removing it from business licensing, and then table any action if they feel appropriate. If you think we need to gather some more information to support the removal of business license requirements. Steve.
I can add some more color here. So, Tricia was right, the clerk's office was absolutely adamant about removing the requirement for business license. And their justification for that is that the business license is kind of designed for businesses with a physical location in Walker, so you can tie them to an address. And there are other components of that business license that are kind of designed for a structure around it. And obviously, I think what the discussion in ordinance committee kind of centered around is it is very important and imperative that we get these food trucks off of the solicitor's license. And that kind of became one of the primary focuses because the solicitor's license structure was kind of designed to be arduous so that folks, so we get less solicitors who are not very deliberate and attentive about their need to do so. And I guess it's kind of served as a deterrent to those who actually want to operate as a food truck or business in the community. But the issues with the business license are, I guess, centered around the fact that it's not really designed for a use like a food vendor, a mobile food vendor. So I guess what we had talked about is going through a longer process on that side to develop maybe a specific mobile food vending license. Because we have a couple of other licenses that are kind of ad hoc, like snowplow operators have a specific license in the community. So we thought that might be a better direction to go. But I guess what we had talked about at the ordinance level is that that process might take a little bit longer. And in the meantime, what could be done is operating food trucks under the umbrella of the temporary use permit. And it's probably only for a limited amount of time anyways, in that the way it's kind of set up, we're probably only going to be seeing that use until winter time rolls around, and then you probably won't have any at all in terms of food trucks. So I guess the discussion circled around, let's get the solicitor license removed, the need for a solicitor license removed now, and let's talk about how we're going to license mobile food vendors, because we had this discussion here, right? I think almost all of us remember going through and setting up this ordinance in the first place, but I guess the unintended consequences that we have heard from mobile food vendors who have more or less refused to work in our community or have circumvented the process entirely otherwise is that the solicitor's license is too cumbersome and more costly than what they see in any other communities that they're operating in. So I guess that's kind of how we landed with what we sent forward. And I think a big part of this was, no matter what, we just wanted to make sure we had the public hearing on this amendment, whether or not we were going to take action on it tonight. Having that out of the way gives us more flexibility to then advance the amendments whenever we do feel comfortable with it. So.
How many food vendors do we have?
Not really any, right? I mean, very limited number, probably only a few have operated in the city under the structure that we put in place, if at all.
Yeah, I think we've had probably 3 or 4 that have applied for temporary use permits. And I think, what's that?
Have we had any apply for the solicitor's license?
I don't believe that the clerk's office is processing them as solicitors.
And let me make a couple comments. This is very confusing. I'm sorry, the redlining and everything. What I've seen done in the past is 2 columns. This is what it said, this is what it now says. You can redline what's being removed and you can greenline what's been put in. That way you get each section and you can tell what has been changed side by side. I would like to see it that way. It's too hard to keep track of, and I read through this stuff actually. I actually read through this stuff. It's too hard to keep
So this is just your standard track changes in Microsoft Word. So things that are taken out are seen as strike through. Things that are added are shown in red and underlined. I don't know if I need to put a key in here.
I saw it done before where it's side by side, so we can really go down and say, oh, here's what's changed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just easier comparison visually.
No, in defense of Tricia, you go back and this is quite detailed.
It is very detailed.
Yeah.
Oh, she's done her work. She's confusing me. What I'm saying is she's done her work, but she confused me.
There's a portion on here for the amendment under it's the definition, or it's the temporary use part where there's some language that's shown in blue, and those are just Frank and I were going back and forth. His comments are in blue, mine are in red. Some are highlighted to bring emphasis.
That's not confusing.
Uh,
Are you asking for us to vote on something tonight?
So mainly, we wanted to get the public hearing out of the way. Yes, we do eventually need to vote on this, but before we make a decision that says that mobile food vendors do not have to have a business license in the city of Walker, let's take a look at why we have licensing for snowplows, why we have licensing for refuse haulers. I don't work in that field, so I don't want to have you guys vote on something that is really just, we don't have an application for that. So, I guess what I'm asking is for you guys, if you're thinking about tabling any action tonight, to think about why do we have business licenses for some of those oddball uses like snow removal and waste haulers.
Communication and accountability. Because in both cases, in terms of snowplowers, you want them to make sure that they're aware of the rules and they follow them. And if they don't follow them, you know how to get a hold of them. And I think the same thing may hold true for mobile food vendors. What I don't see here is the health department approval. I thought that was in it previously.
That was, so I moved that over into the application requirements in 523.
Okay. But that's, again, accountability.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody gets sick, you can get a hold of the vendor and get the information.
You're exactly right. That's a lot of what we had talked about as maybe the biggest part of having folks get these mobile food vendor licenses whenever they come to fruition, whatever they look like, is making sure that we're clearly laying out what the standards are for operating here and making sure that they have agreed with them. And that might be the biggest thing that we collect out of that license. But making sure that that's clear is kind of first and foremost with that.
I think the idea of taking them out of the solicitor category, I think, makes some sense. And that grouping with the other two that you just mentioned seems like one that makes sense. And if they're going to do business here, that communication and a license fee, I'm not sure what it is, but if you set it at a reasonable amount, it won't scare them away, but at the same time, you've got the communication with them.
And the other part was that making sure that the goal would be to have them process through, I think, community development so that it's not having to bounce between different departments at City Hall and allowing them to kind of make sure everything is done together and not having, I guess, that separation between the two processes.
Yeah, and I think that we could coordinate with the clerk's office to kind of streamline that process. Like, you need your approval from the community development department, and then you can ask for your business license. But we don't want to have them duplicate any of the application requirements. So if you have all the application requirements under one of the umbrellas versus both of them, I think that's kind of what the clerk's office was emphasizing in terms of, it's silly to process these licenses for the mobile food vendors when the community development department could be doing it all. But there's certain components that we're just not going to track. Because obviously we deal with land use and zoning. And so if there's, like Terry mentioned, if there's something that went awry with one of these food trucks and somebody got sick or whatever, it's the business license that I feel like would hold somebody accountable and not the temporary use license or temporary use permit.
So we should officially open the public hearing. Do we have a motion?
Motion to open the public hearing.
Motion by Tyler, supported by
Support it.
Pat, to open the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Open public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing?
Support.
Motion by Pat, supported by Tyler, to close the public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. As far as our action on it, it sounds like you've got a list of prospective changes here, and that might lend itself to tabling action to a later date.
I'll try to make it more clear for Tyler. Maybe do some different color coding for you.
I just like side by side, that's just me.
More pictures.
I'll
Okay.
get over it.
All right, do we,
16.
do we have a motion to table action then? Moved by Tyler, supported by Jason to table action. All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Any other business?
I do like snowplow license, I think.